Hello, students, and welcome. Today, we're going to revise a very important chapter from your Civics syllabus, Working of Institutions. So, let's get started.
So let's quickly see what we'll be covering today. This is our plan to make sure all our concepts are crystal clear by the end of this session.
All right, first things first, let's talk about a very common idea people have about democracy. You see, it's not just about that one day we all go to vote. It's so much more than that. It's a continuous process that happens every single day.
So, this really makes us think, doesn't it? Is democracy simply about choosing our leaders every few years? What really happens after the elections are over?
Well, the answer is a big no. In a true democracy, the people we elect, they can't just do whatever they want. They have to follow certain rules and procedures, and they do this by working with and within what we call institutions. These are the systems and organizations that help run the country.
Okay, so what are these key institutions we're talking about? You can think of our government as being built on three main pillars. These are the key players in our democracy. And here they are, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. It's quite simple, really. The legislature's job is to make the laws for the country. The executive's job is to implement those laws, to put them into action. And the judiciary? Well, they resolve disputes and interpret the laws. These three together form the very foundation of our government.
Now, to really understand how these three pillars work together, it's best to look at a real-life example. For this, we'll revisit the very famous case study of the Mandel Commission.
It all started with this single piece of paper. Now, it might look like any other government notice, right? But this was an office memorandum, a formal government order, and it announced a huge policy decision, a 27% reservation in government jobs for socially and educationally backward classes, or SEBCs. As you can imagine, this one order started a massive nationwide debate.
This case is a perfect textbook example of our institutions in action. Let's break it down. First, the cabinet, which is a very important part of the executive, made the big policy decision. Then, the civil servants, who are also part of the executive, were the ones who issued the official order you just saw. But then disputes and protests started. So what happened next? The Supreme Court, the highest body of our judiciary, stepped in. It heard all the arguments and gave the final verdict. See how they all played their part?
That example really showed us how the different institutions interact. So now, let's zoom in a little bit and take a closer look at the first two pillars we mentioned, the legislature, which we all know as our parliament, and the executive.
So what exactly is Parliament? Well, you can think of it as the highest, the supreme lawmaking body in our country. It's the National Assembly where all our elected representatives, the members of Parliament or MPs, gather to discuss and make decisions for all of us.
Now, Parliament isn't just one single group. It's actually made up of two houses. We have the Lok Sabha, which is also called the House of the People, and the Rajya Sabha, or the Council of States. And it's very important to remember that the President of India is also considered an integral part of Parliament.
This is a really interesting part. The executive itself is split into two types. On one hand, you have the political executive. These are our ministers, including the Prime Minister. They are elected by us, the people, for a fixed period of time. On the other hand, you have the permanent executive. These are the civil servants like IAS officers. They are appointed on a long-term basis. So the political executive takes the big policy decisions and the permanent executive helps them and carries out those decisions.
Now, in India, we have a parliamentary system of government, and in this system, the Prime Minister is the head of the government. This means he or she holds the real executive power and leads the cabinet, which is at the center of most of the major decisions that are made.
So what about the president? Well, the president is the head of the state. This is the highest formal authority in the country, but the role is mostly ceremonial. The president usually has to act on the advice given by the prime minister and the council of ministers.
All right, that brings us to our third and final pillar, the judiciary. Think of the judiciary as the guardian. It's an independent body that protects our laws and, very importantly, our fundamental rights. You see, the Indian judiciary is an integrated system. What that means is that it's all one structure. At the very top, we have the Supreme Court. Below that are the high courts in the states, and then you have the district and other lower courts. A key thing to remember is that the decisions made by the Supreme Court have to be followed by all the other courts in the country.
The judiciary has a very, very special power. It's called judicial review. This basically means that the Supreme Court and high courts can look at any law that Parliament has passed. And if they find that the law goes against the basic principles of our Constitution, they have the power to strike it down, to declare it invalid. This power really makes the judiciary the ultimate guardian of our Constitution.
Okay,
So we've looked at all three pillars. Now, let's tie it all together. Why is it so important to have this system of different institutions? How does it make our democracy strong?
Well, the main idea is actually quite simple. By dividing power between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, we make sure that no single person or group can become too powerful. Each institution keeps a check on the others. This is what we call a system of checks and balances, and it's there to prevent any misuse of power.
This cartoon illustrates a very important point. Yes, these institutions run the country, but ultimately, who supports them? Who holds them up? It's us, the citizens. A democracy works best when its people are aware and involved.
And this brings us to a final, very important thought. We've said that our institutions hold the government accountable. But then, who holds the institutions accountable? The answer, students, is we do. As aware citizens, it's our job to keep a watch on how these institutions are working.
All right, so to wrap up our revision, let's quickly go over the main points to remember. First, democracy is not just about voting. It needs institutions to work every day. Second, our government stands on three pillars: legislature, executive, and judiciary. Parliament's job is to make laws. The executive, led by the Prime Minister, implements those laws, and the judiciary protects our Constitution. And finally, all these institutions keep each other in check. As you watch the news or read the newspaper, try to spot these institutions in action. It will make everything much clearer. That's all for today's Explainer. Happy revising!